largest city in Iraq is Mosul. And like a lot of American cities, a lot of cities around the world, Mosul is built around a river. Tigris River runs right through the middle of Mosul. It divides Mosul into an eastern side on one side of the river and a western side on the other. And Mosul's a big city. It has millions of residents. And that's why it was a really big deal almost 3 years ago when Mosul got taken over by ISIS. By far, Mosul was the largest city under ISIS control anywhere. And from Iraq's perspective, to have their second largest city taken over by ISIS, that was just stunning to Iraq's conception of itself and the threat that ISIS posed to that country. But ISIS took Mosul almost 3 years ago, 2014. And you almost never get any good news when it comes to stories about ISIS. But in this case, there is good news. The Iraqi prime minister announced yesterday that at least in the eastern part of Mosul, east of the Tigris, ISIS has now been cleared out. The military offensive to reclaim Mosul started last year, and east of the Tigris, they say that mission has succeeded. ISIS is out. The Iraqi government has liberated East Mosul, and it absolutely was Iraqi forces who retook that city. But American troops are there in pretty big numbers, too, supporting that fight. U.S. troops, U.S. air power, U.S. special forces have been there advising and supporting Iraqis in that fight against ISIS. A couple of days ago on this show, we showed those images we got of U.S. airstrikes blowing up nearly 100 boats on the Tigris, boats that ISIS was using to have their fighters escape across the Tigris River from the east side of Mosul to the west side, fleeing this Iraqi ground offensive that's been happening there with U.S. support. Well, now that the eastern side of Mosul has been cleared of ISIS, one of the day-to-day consequences of that for the little kids of Mosul is that those kids are now able to go back to school. ISIS had shut down all of the schools in Mosul, in that giant city. And the UN now says that 30 Mosul schools have reopened. That means something like 16,000 little Iraqi kids, as of today, are finally able to go back to school after more than 2 years of being kept at home because ISIS shut the schools. And yeah, you see, in some of these pictures, you see like matching backpacks, little blue backpacks on all the kids. Those are donated backpacks from UNICEF. It's an emotional thing to see the kids running back into their classrooms, right? Finally able to get back to school. It is just great at a human level. They've been out of school for 2 years. But clearly there is still work to do there. This is just the eastern part of Mosul. The western part of Mosul on the other side of that river, that is not yet cleared of ISIS. And for American troops, for the more than 5,000 American troops who are in Iraq, partnering with Iraqi forces in this fight against ISIS, that means they are still in the thick of it. And there's a lot of fighting still ahead, a lot of danger. And the partnership between U.S. troops and Iraqi security forces over there, it's a delicate thing, but it's a very important thing. If you want to beat ISIS, you have to beat ISIS in Iraq, right? I mean, Iraq is the second eye in ISIS, Islamic State in Iraq and Syria. ISIS took over huge swaths of Iraq. They took over Iraq's second largest city. The fight against ISIS can't be waged without Iraq. The fight against ISIS has unified and mobilized all these different factions in Iraq to all pull in the same direction. It's an existential thing for their country to defeat ISIS, and Iraq as a country is motivated to do it. And the skill and the firepower and the experience of U.S. troops is absolutely a force multiplier in terms of increasing the likelihood that Iraq will defeat ISIS. So it is a delicate thing that U.S. troops are involved in this, but it is important. And this is something that we do not want to screw up. And this is something that is now being screwed up by our new president.
We should have kept the oil, but okay. Maybe you'll have another chance. But the fact is, should have kept the oil.
That was the day after he was sworn in as president, his first full day as president. No longer a candidate for public office, just talking smack and criticizing U.S. policy or past U.S. actions. That's now the commander-in-chief of the U.S. military, the president of the United States, declaring what the new U.S. policy is. As president, he's saying that it is U.S. policy that we should keep the oil, that the U.S. should have kept Iraqi oil in the past, and he said, quote, maybe you'll have another chance, end quote, to take Iraq's oil. So that was Saturday. Now we've got the Iraqi prime minister giving this press conference talking about the liberation of eastern Mosul from ISIS and those little kids being back at school for the first time in 2 years. He's talking about this great military success that Iraqi forces have had, in part by partnering with and accepting training from and help from thousands of U.S. troops who are in Iraq for that fight. And at that press conference, what does the Prime Minister get asked about? He has to answer questions about whether those U.S. troops who are in Iraq right now are there to take Iraq's oil. And the Prime Minister responded that he doesn't think so. He said he doesn't know what the new president means by that. He said at this press conference yesterday, quote, "Iraqi oil is for Iraqis. No official anywhere in the world claims something that is not his." But this is a dangerous thing to not have clarity on. And I don't mean it's dangerous in some academic geopolitical sense. I mean it's literally physically dangerous for the American troops who are in Iraq right now. If the Iraqis they're serving alongside think that the United States has these members of our military in that country right now because it is now U.S. policy to take Iraq's oil, that is very dangerous for American troops in that environment, right? Like fighting ISIS wasn't dangerous enough. So we reported some of this on Monday Night Show. Now we have something new. Morza Dargahi, a longtime Middle East correspondent, really good reporter, is now with BuzzFeed. He's obtained a 2-minute video that's reportedly circulating very widely in Iraqi social media. It's a 2-minute video. The title page here says, "The Politics of the New President of America Toward Iraq," and then the red word in the middle is Trump in Arabic. And then for over 2 minutes, there's this montage of the new President of the United States talking about Iraq, talking about how U.S. policy toward Iraq should be to take their most important natural resource. And the clips are all in English, of course, because he speaks English, but they're all subtitled in Arabic for an Arabic-speaking audience.
Their armies are wiped out. They have weak armies. It's a corrupt society anyway. I mean, it's totally corrupt what's going on over there. So I said very simply that if it's me, we take the oil.
I said, if we leave it, take the oil. At least pay us back. And I come out front page news, oh, Trump is a horrible human being. He wants to take the oil from a sovereign country. Sovereign. Give me a break. You see the people ripping off sovereign.
Would you be destroying the wealth of Iraq?
No, let me get. There is no Iraq. There is no Iraq. Their leaders are corrupt. Excuse me, there are no Iraqis. They're broken up into so many different factions.
How are we going to take the oil? How are we going to do that?
You would leave a certain group behind, and you would take various sections where they have the oil.
So you would keep troops in Iraq after this year?
I would take the oil.
I don't understand how you would take the. Does that mean keeping troops there or staying involved in Iraq?
You heard me. I would take the oil.
Again, the reason that has Arabic subtitles is because that is circulating widely on social media in Iraq. And now our new president has reiterated that sentiment in his first full day in office, unprompted. He brought it up again. And now the Iraqi prime minister is fielding questions about it from the Iraqi press corps. And all the while, more than 5,000 Americans tonight are in Iraq, as this now takes hold because of our new president. Deputy Pentagon spokesman who was in the post until last week under the Obama administration put out this statement this week saying the White House needs to clearly say the U.S. isn't going to take Iraq's oil. Every moment that statement stands puts our troops at greater risk. But it was not an error by the White House spokesman. It is the policy of the United States now under this new president that really seriously changes the risk environment in which our troops are operating right now. This is not hypothetical. This is happening. And as this builds and builds in Iraq, I think the White House is going to have to explain pretty soon how they're going to fix this, or why they don't care about the target that this has just put on U.S. soldiers serving abroad in what is already a very dangerous place. It's serious stuff. That's for us tonight. We will see you again tomorrow. Now